Welcome to another edition of Black and Azul, now in our 16th edition. Thank you so much for tuning in and week out. My name is Charles Wollin. Alongside me, I've got Jamon Moore right here, and I've got Alex Morgan here in the studio to break down the DC United game, kind of move us forward to the FC Dallas game, talk a little international ball. But let's start off. How you doing, guys?
I'm doing fantastic, and thank you for having me back on the show. The last time was fun. Joel and I had some arguments, and you invited me back anyway, so I do appreciate that.
And he's a great debater. No debate tonight, but we'll save it for future episodes. Alex Morgan, how you feeling?
Awesome. Thank you guys for all tuning in. While the Warriors are playing up north, we're happy to have you.
Absolutely. Just remember, guys, you can ask any question on the show. We'll get to the questions a little bit later on the program, but as always, it's an inclusive program. We want to be able to take your questions, comments, feedback, any comment. It is good, regardless of what it is. So let's have at it. Let's jump right on in the Quakes. A 1-1 draw at DC United. Wondo just keeps doing his thing. 1-1 on the day there.
Well, I mean, you go from 4 goals to 2 goals to 1 goal. I believe it's Wondo's best 3-game stretch. 7 goals over 3 games, I believe, is his best stretch in his career. Maybe he just gets better with age. I was on this show a couple weeks ago talking about how I thought that they should go right back to Danny Hoesen. I admit that I was wrong. But, I mean, the question is, can we continue this run of form, and for how long? But for right now, it's a lot of fun. Nick Lima with the assist, and I think that was a really good game overall for the Quakes. Started off very hot in the first half, put a lot of pressure on early, and it paid dividends.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of results the Quakes will need to be able to get a playoff spot. You're going on the road in MLS, 2 consecutive road games back-to-back against Toronto and DC. You get 4 points. I think they can only be happy with that. Speaking of Wondo, he continued to find his spaces. He's on a great run of form. He always says that goals come in bunches. I think right now this is more than a bunch. This is a truckload. 7 goals in 3 games. And he found himself in some incredible spots. I was surprised, against Toronto, he scored 2 goals in very similar positions. And against DC United, he continued to get in those same spots early on across from Shea Salinas. Found him in a near identical spot as to where he was against Toronto. And even though everybody knows he's going to be there, he still finds his space, and he couldn't put it on target that time, but his goal later in the first half was quite special to watch.
Yeah, and you had an interesting lineup put out there. You had Danny Hoesen playing on the left, something we hadn't seen since 2017, actually, where he had played a little bit over there back when the Quakes featured Wondolowski up top along with Marco Uriña. And so it was a place that he has been before, but we just hadn't seen him there for some time. It was great to see him on the field with Wondo. Shea Salinas moved over to the right, and we had a new man in the middle due to a concussion injury to Magnus Eriksson.
Yes, Vako. We talked about it on last week's show, how he might have an opportunity to make his case to play in the starting lineup. And I think he played a solid game. I think he looked like a guy who had been snubbed.
Yeah.
We were talking about before the show. He looked like a guy who was hungry to make his case. Certainly he didn't look as dejected on the field as he had in previous games. He was looking to intercept balls in the middle. He was first to a lot of balls there. He didn't quite have the clinicality in the final third that he could have, and that he'll want to be able to cement a spot in the starting lineup and take it back from Magnus Eriksson. But his defense improved. I think those are good signs.
Yeah, speaking of defense, I mean, he had 3 interceptions, he had 7 ball recoveries, he had a tackle where he won a ball in the penalty box. Then these were key moments, and they kept the pressure on DC, and Bill Hamid had a lot of problems playing out of the back, getting the ball to his center backs, and beginning the distribution, and the ball stayed in the Quakes attacking zone for pretty much the entire first half. They got the goal, went to halftime with that 1-0 lead, and then things kind of changed from there.
I think, that was the key in the first half. The Quakes really surprised DC United with their intensity right from the opening whistle. They were pressing high, and even though their touch was, I think, a little long at times, they were winning all the loose balls in the middle, and that really kept sustained pressure on DC and made it difficult for DC to really get a rhythm going.
And then the second half, we see Vega basically being the savior again, and like he has so many times this season, proven his worth, has now cemented the starting goalkeeper for the San Jose Earthquakes. In case there was any question at the beginning of the year whether that was going to continue to happen, he just keeps showing, and he had 4 or 5 magnificent saves, and all of them, highlight worthy. And unfortunately, though, one of those punches actually went right back to Lucho Acosta and was finished off. And maybe the Quakes were falling a little asleep there as well on that rebound and not realizing that they had to get to that ball.
Yeah, I think, for me, every time that I see Vega and every time I saw, the match this weekend, and on Twitter, it was highlight reel after highlight reel after highlight reel. And we absolutely love to chat about the goalkeeper on the show. And it's something that the Quakes haven't had for many years, probably since John Bush or Joe Cannon played for this side, since their departures. And so kind of establishing himself as this veteran goalkeeper, a little bit older with this gritty resume of playing in NASL is something that's always going to keep this team in games and make sure that they've got points underneath their belt. Now 3 games unbeaten for this side. How much of this is actually down to the fact that Chris Wondolowski has been absolutely on a tear, and the goalkeeper has also been on the tear at the same time? What do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that you have to consider is that Wondo has actually scored the last 7 goals for this club. I mean, if Wondo was not in that position, how would this club have fared over the last 3 games? It's, you have to ponder that, because you can't imagine that Wondo at his age is going to be able to play every single game 90 minutes at the top. And so they are going to need to start to get more production again. If Danny Hoesen's coming back off his injury, we're going to need to see production there. If Vako steps onto the pitch, we're going to need to see goals there. Magnus Eriksson obviously we did have a couple players out for red cards in this game. So getting those players back on and productive is very important for the Quakes. And right now, I think the thing I would like to see more than anything in order to really see this as a playoff team is to see that those goals are starting to be spread again across the team, and that this is coming together as an attacking team and not just 1 or 2 players that are handling all the load.
And look, I think they have the attacking options. If Wondolowski stops scoring, Danny is more than ready to take his spot and more than capable. You have Shea, who's been on a tear this season. You have Espinosa, who is out due to yellow card accumulation, but he's been fantastic this season. You have Eriksson, you have Vako ready to make his case. This team is not lacking for attacking options. I just think, as we go into the summer months, it'll be key to have that depth and be able to spread the goals around, as Jamon said.
Let's talk a little bit about Saeed Haji. Paul Marie gets his start at right back. There's kind of been a lot of chatter about, are those guys going to get involved? A lot of hype, with Haji, and we haven't had the chance to fully address it. But we were just chatting in the pre-show, and Jamon, what do you make of Haji coming on and his performance, and shouts for him to, hey, let's get this guy in the starting 11. Let's get him in the Open Cup matches.
Yeah, there was a lot of noise on Twitter before the game. Would we see Saeed Haji feature in the game? In fact, some people were even calling for him to be in the center, which is not his natural position. So yeah, it's exciting that the Quakes do have young options that people want to see on the pitch, and it's important for these players to get their playing time. And we're starting to see that Almeida is having more and more confidence to be able to put these younger guys on the pitch. In fact, there's even young guys like Avila who are not currently seeing time that we know he likes. And we know that he would like to be able to put on the pitch in the right situations. And Saeed Haji, I thought, took advantage of the situation. A fantastic through ball to Wondo that took out about 5 guys out with 1 pass. Wondo was just a little bit offside. Could have been a win for the Quakes, ends up being a draw, but Saeed Haji definitely impressed with that. Matt Doyle with comments about that particular pass and just how rare it is for someone who's played 2 MLS games to have that kind of field vision.
Yeah, and I think the key will be getting him more minutes. And I think, in the next couple weeks, we could see him getting more minutes with the Open Cup game. That'll definitely be an opportunity for some of those younger guys to get on the field. And also against Dallas this weekend, because the Quakes have multiple players missing for international duty. They have Lima, who will be out for the U.S., Godoy will be out, Cummings will be out, and Kashi will be out. So those will be a lot of places to fill, and I think we could see some of those younger guys filling those spots.
Yeah, and I think that the younger players are certainly going to need to impress the manager very quick, very fast, but they do have this opportunity in the Open Cup, and potentially maybe a friendly coming up in the summer that the Quakes will be late to announce. But this team needs a little bit more depth in order to survive and play the way that they're playing under this manager. But I think that this manager is going to want to pull and keep some of these younger players. And you can clearly see and know that his pedigree is to bring in younger players, groom them, and then put them into a starting 11. Let's talk about the international break. Every single week on this show, you guys have asked, how are the Quakes going to cope with the international break? Alex, I'm going to bring it right back to you. You just read off the names. How are they going to cope with the the Gold Cup and the internationals leaving this team?
So I think there are a couple one-to-one replacements that are fairly obvious. With Nick Lima out, I think Lopez is the natural replacement for Lima. With Godoy out, I think it's fairly certain that Judson's going to be placed in the middle. Whether he's in a defensive midfielder position or stepping in at center back is unclear, because you also have Cummings and Kasia out, so your only starting center back left would be Flo. And the other two center backs the Quakes have in their roster in Affolter and Ockford, we haven't seen them at all this season, so we don't know if Matthias trusts them yet to throw them into a game.
Yeah, because of the style that Matthias plays, it's a good question. Are these players going to be fit to be able to go onto the field? You usually don't sub center backs. You're expecting them to go 90 minutes, and so this is going to be a real test for the Quakes. On Saturday, we're going to find out what Matthias thinks of his center back situation. If he puts Judson back there, great opportunity for someone maybe like Luis Fernandez or Eric Avillo or somebody like that. Mm-hmm. However, that said, that means he doesn't have a lot of confidence in the options behind, the three center backs that have been featured so far this season.
Yeah, exactly. Tactically, it's basically ripping out the heart of this team. Mm-hmm. The defensive central midfield player and two of the center backs, gone. Kasia did start the season, and Flo replaced him, but essentially they're missing quite a bit. And now, Lima as well at right back, and let's move on and transition to chat about him and Jackson Yule a little bit. Go ahead.
I was going to add about Jackson Yule. There are still a couple other question marks. Magnus Eriksson was out last week with a concussion, or he's listed as questionable because of a concussion, and we don't have an update as of yet as to whether he'll be fit. And also Jackson Yule, he played 60 minutes more or less for the national team today, and whether he still has the legs to play this weekend is uncertain. Yeah,
we did get the confirmation that Jackson Yule is expected to rejoin the team tomorrow. So fantastic for him. Even though he wasn't on the 40-man provisional roster for the Gold Cup, he got invited to camp. And he got to play in the game tonight, got his opportunity against Jamaica, unfortunately in a 0-1 loss. Overall, the team didn't look that great, but I don't think that was necessarily due to Jackson. I think he had about an average game. And now he's going to rejoin the team and should be available for selection this weekend. We do expect that Matthias is likely to use him.
Yeah, I actually personally don't like the fact that he was not... I don't like this rule of being able to call up other players outside the 40-man list. I think he should have just been in the list. Let's be fair here. Mm-hmm. Here's a player who has just absolutely taken his chance more than any other player probably in this league. A player that was not exactly written off, but someone that just is a hardworking player, blue-collared, but has come into his own, can play at the double pivot at the base of it. In defensive central midfield, or can play as a box-to-box, or can play as an attacking midfielder. He has it all. We won't overhype him on the show because we are enjoying the way that he is playing. But I was looking at it and thinking to myself, wait, what? He's not going to be on the team. He's not, it's just strange the way that was kind of put together. And I'm not sure if I'm someone that believes in that. If you pick him, he has the chance to be in the 23-person squad, and then he's in the squad. And certainly, he deserves to be in the squad. Let's be honest.
I think a lot of people think that. He definitely has impressed this season. He definitely has caught the attention of a lot of people. He's been a regular in the U23s. And let's not forget, the U23s have not been able to qualify for the Olympics in the last couple cycles. And it is very important to Greg Berhalter to be able to qualify for the Olympics. So there's a good chance that that's factored into this a bit, that he's saving Jackson Yule, JT Marcinkowski, and the players that can play for the U23s and be able to help us with Olympic qualifying for that particular role, but wanted to give him the opportunity here. Coming into the game today, Greg Berhalter said that 21 of his 23 spots, he already knew who was going to fit that. That means there was only 2 spots available. I get the sense that his central midfield was pretty much locked up, and he felt, you know what, I already know what I'm going to do in my central midfield. Great opportunity to bring in Jackson Yueill. And you know, it was great that he did get the start, you know, but I agree with you. I think he should have been probably on the 40-man provisional, and at least Greg could have made the decision in camp as to whether he had earned one of the spots for the 23 or not.
Look, and I certainly think he's made his case. I think the thing that has, you know, taken Yueill from being one of the kids who's nice to see play in sort of unimportant situations to being a week in, week out starter for the Quakes has been his defense. You know, he's under Matthias worked really hard off the ball. Right. He no longer gets caught out high up the field, out of position. And he's also generally more consistent and reliable. He's a guy that Matthias can count on. I think he's cleaned up a lot of the errant passes that you would sometimes see last season and in prior years. So he's definitely a guy that, you know, we hope to see more of in the U.S. national team fold.
Yeah, and I'm excited about the U23s, the Olympic qualifying cycle, and seeing how those guys perform there too. And that's later to come this year.
Okay, so let's chat now about Nick Lima. He played today as well. You know, lots of chatter at the beginning of the year. Is he in the squad? Is he out of the squad? What's the deal? Et cetera, et cetera. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I think for the Quakes, you know, they certainly hope that he's not in the squad. But I think he's earned it. You know, he's a reliable left back, and I think that the U.S. national team, he'll be a good option for them, and they'll be able to use him.
I think Greg Berhalter has shown his hand here. He's been able to take that right back position and be able to flex it into a defensive midfielder when he wants to, or the right back position. Nick Lima, as someone who played forward in college, is someone who's kind of perfect to be able to put into that position. And really, he tried it out for Tyler Adams, let's be honest, right? And we know that that's going to be Tyler Adams' spot. I'm actually more interested to see if Greg would give him an opportunity in the left back spot, where I think the U.S. is actually a little weaker. Why not be able to flex the option to be able to convert your left back also into a defensive midfielder whenever you want and have both? I think that Nick Lima right now should actually be challenging for the left back spot rather than the right back spot for the U.S., where we know he's probably going to just sit the bench unless the U.S. is guaranteed their spot to move forward. That's probably the only opportunity Nick's going to get.
Yeah, that is some tactical genius stuff that you've just heard from Jamon Moore right there. We're going to get to your questions in just a moment here. Remember, this is an inclusive show. Please ask us some questions. Write your comments on the side. We know it is game number 3 of the NBA Finals, and our Golden State Warriors playing just up the road from our studio location here. Appreciate you guys tuning in, of course, to that. Quickly back to this defensive midfielder, you know, outside back type of system that Greg Berhalter has put in place.
Right.
Is it sustainable, though, with just one guy? I mean, it's a lot of running. You can see Nick gets to the end line when they have the ball. You can see when they don't have the ball, he crashes in and tries to squeeze into central midfield. And you can see the itch in him. You can see that he wants to be that guy. Is it sustainable that you're just going to have 1 or 2 guys do that? Or is, you know, he really auditioning for that position and knowing how to do it well, because it's not your regular player that knows how to do that. I don't know a lot of teams that actually have players that do that. So
no, it's very interesting that Greg Berhalter identified Nick Lima for this, because he's not something he has shown in MLS, not something he was given the opportunity to do under Stare or anyone before that. So it is interesting that he's had this opportunity, but I thought he really made the most of it when he got the opportunity in the first couple of games, and I think he validated what Berhalter sees in the role. Is Berhalter willing to substitute that position in order to maintain a high level of intensity as an outside back? We've seen Matthias is very willing to sub outside back situations, but by and large, most coaches are not willing to use one of their 3 subs on an outside back.
Yeah, I think you explained it perfectly.
let's move on and chat a little bit about FC Dallas, the Quakes hosting them at Avaya, or as Joel Soria likes to say, Avaya Castle. I know he's tuning in from somewhere. and I'm assuming that he's going to ask us a question as well. But FC Dallas, they're missing a couple of players. And the Quakes have a really good record at home as of late, and haven't just been beating teams; they've been crushing teams. They one of their scorelines recently, excuse me, let me back up for a second here. The only scoreline recently that they've had this run of form, there was a 1-0 victory against Cincinnati, and there was a red card in that match. But all of the other matches, they've absolutely played teams off of the park and scored multiple goals to win by multiple goals, right?
I think what's interesting is the Quakes have been dominating almost every single game from a possession and from a danger perspective, usually winning what they call the expected goals battle of the game, right? Mm-hmm. And so we see that now, whether home or away, which is a really interesting wrinkle about Matias' system. It's tough to dial this back. And so you go on the road, you're playing just as aggressive as you do at home, but what we do find is that the Quakes are much more efficient putting the ball in the back of the net at home than they are on the road so far.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons that the Quakes defense has improved this season is just, with time, it's become a lot more structured. There's a lot more, players are knowing their second in their third marks, and you're seeing, now you're not seeing Tommy Thompson track his mark all the way, to the other side of the field. So generally, there's more defensive structure. And Matias will, I think, consider changing his game plan against Dallas. He talked about in his midweek press conference, in the press release we got, about changing his system so that he gives Dallas more space, considering all the absences, a somewhat more, reliable formation.
And actually, back to the internationals, Dallas is going to be missing their own set of players due to the U20s actually getting past France in the first game of the knockout round of the U20 World Cup. And so because of that, FC Dallas is going to continue to miss a couple key players for them, which Paxton Pomykal in the center of the park is basically, like their Anibal Godoy for the Quakes. And so, that's a key thing that's missing. It may be that given these players are missing, it may be that he sees an opportunity to kind of force them to play in a different style that they're not going to be comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And so he's looking to say, what would we do differently? But the last time the Quakes faced FC Dallas, a 0-0 draw on the road, they basically just outlasted them in the heat and humidity of the Texas sun. And it was really amazing. And you heard the national commentators really commenting about how that preseason workouts that Matias was doing down in Cancun were really starting to pay dividends for the team, and how FC Dallas was starting to wilt. In fact, since that game, FC Dallas has only won one game. That was this past weekend against the Seattle Sounders, and they won because of 2 own goals by the Sounders. Not exactly, a great run of form right now for FC Dallas.
Given Dallas's record, I think the Quakes have to expect they will get 3 points out of this match. And speaking to the the fitness of the Quakes, I think that's something that will be very important, considering how much Matias' system asks of his players. Mm-hmm. You see Jackson, for an example, absolutely sprinting to chase balls, even late into the second half against DC. So as you get into these summer months, as we've talked about earlier, that will be a really important factor to make sure that the Quakes can maintain this run of form.
And I think this Open Cup game that's going to come up on Tuesday is also important because it's going to allow some players to get higher in their fitness maybe than they've been able to have because they've not been able to get the field time. So when we talked earlier about some of these options we may be forced into because of absences, some of those players were probably also on the list to play in the Open Cup games. And now hopefully they're going to start to build that stamina. That way, if the Quakes start to do run into some injury trouble, which could happen, based upon the high pressure system that they play and the fact that they go for 90+ minutes every single game very hard, it is quite possible that we're going to need some of those younger players that we talked about earlier much more later in the year.
And Matias is meticulous about this. You see him after every game, home and away, the players who didn't play running sprints up and down the field. He makes sure all his players are fit, and he's detail oriented in that sense.
It's going to be Wondo night on the 8th, Saturday the 8th, when San Jose takes on FC Dallas, and they're going to be Wondo pins, Wondo posters for free, and 10,000 captain's armbands given out. Basically, most of the stadium will get them. They're also an LGBT armband. In addition to LGBT night, there will be free Wondo jersey customization. There will be a Wondo field presentation, Wondo drink specials, and a Wondo memorabilia display. So Wondo is going to get a wonderful little rouse, and hopefully the Quakes will bring back another win. Also, it is going to be Pride Day at the Quakes as well. The first 10,000 fans will receive that Pride armband. They did that a couple years ago. Very, very popular as well. Greg Sherrill and Shannon Clark of Mornings on 99.7 Now will serve as celebrity drummers. There will be rainbow corner flags, goal nets, LEDs as well. And there will be a resource fair for LGBT organizations at the 7-Up Epicenter. So a lot going on to celebrate community, celebrate Chris Wondolowski at the same time on Saturday as we kind of enter Pride Month. You know, Wondo breaking this record, but continuing his run of form as well here. Let's go ahead and take your questions. I know you've got some burning questions, folks, and this is a really good question. Josue Hernandez, with Wondo's scoring form from the last couple of games, should Greg Berhalter give Wondo one last hurrah with the U.S. men's national team after today's disaster game against Jamaica? Great question, Mr. Hernandez. I'm going to send it to you, Alex Morgan, first.
No, I think the Quakes should keep him.
I think we're better off with him right now. No, I think that obviously he's not in the 40-man provisional roster for the Gold Cup. He's not an option for the Gold Cup, just like Jackson Yule's not an option as well. So do I think that it's possible, though, before Wondo rides off into the sunset, that he'll get another opportunity with the national team? I think Greg Berhalter's a classy guy. I would not put it past Greg Berhalter to find an opportunity to be able to honor someone like Wondo.
Do you guys think that Wondo comes back for one more year, writes Ren 1018?
Oh, wow.
Well, that's why he asked it, guys. Come on.
That's a great question.
It's a good question. He always asks good questions.
Yeah, I think that right now he's having a lot of fun. He said that, right? And I think for him, if he gets to the end of the season, and I probably at least squeaks into a playoff spot, and he sees himself still as a potential major option for this team going forward, I think he will sign up for another season. I think if the Quakes miss the playoffs, I think if he's feeling like his run is done, he's set the records he wants to set, and he doesn't see an option next year to be able to take the team to new heights, there's a good chance that he could decide to fade off into the sunset. But I would appreciate a little bit more heads up than we might get at this point about that.
Yeah, he's a consummate professional. I think if he can play a role for the team, he will dutifully play that role, and he'll be more than happy to, just because he loves playing soccer. But I think there's still more to see in the remaining 5-6 months of this season to see what options the Quakes will have in 2019.
Player coach,
potentially.
Yeah, and I've said it before here on the show. I think he's going to be a fantastic coach, should he, and I think he will take up his coaching licenses and coach. I think he will be a phenomenal coach. He's always just so positive. I've gotten the chance to interact with him off the field as well in various organizations, Street Soccer USA just being one of them. But Chris, I know you're probably not watching this, but you will be a fantastic coach one day should you choose to do that. And MLS doesn't have the best former players that have played in this league become coaches. I'll be honest in saying that. And I think a lot of folks would like to see you stay within this league and stay with your passion, which is clearly this game, the game that we all love. Back to Josue Hernandez here. Where would you rank the Quakes personally in your power rankings? Second, add on to this, top 10?
Wow, it's getting close. So there was a little bit of back and forth about this on Twitter this week, and I think some of the fans watching probably engaged in some of this conversation. So ESPN actually ranked the Quakes 20th out of 24, whereas MLSsoccer.com put them at 12. I think 12 feels about right for what they've earned so far. I do think that, yes, they're on a fantastic run of form. I think they've got a little bit more to prove in order to break into that top 10. I think being in a playoff spot that is free and clear, I think also earns them that. I just think that the Quakes have a little bit more baggage than the people who are doing the power rankings want to see, and they just want to see another month of good performance before they rank them in the upper tier of MLS teams. But I think 12 is about right.
And the Quakes have a good opportunity to get into the playoffs if they get 3 points against Dallas this weekend. Right. Real Salt Lake, one of the teams ahead of them, will be playing LAFC, so it's likely that they'll drop points there, and if they beat Dallas, they'll be tied on points with them as well. So yeah, I think if the Quakes can get into a playoff spot and sort of claim one for their own, and they continue this run of form, yeah, definitely top 10.
Yeah, definitely.
Final question comes from our co-host who's not in studio with us today, but is on his travels and watching the show. Joel Soria, El Profe writes, thus far has Almeida's work been average or proficient? And it is a terrific question. I'm going to throw it right back to you, Alex.
I would say proficient.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think a lot of people expected after the Quakes lost their first 4, I think it was,
yes,
four games of the season, that they'd be where they are right now. I was one of the people who doubted whether Matias' system would work, and I think that they've proven a lot of people wrong, and shown that you can play this kind of ambitious soccer in Major League Soccer without players like Carlos Vela to back you up.
Yeah, and I think that he's gotten the most out of what he has, and that's I think the mark of a good coach. So I think we all knew at the beginning of the year that they didn't have enough roster turnover, and that was a major concern. And they don't have that premier player, they don't have that game-changing player right now. And the fact that he's been able to get this team into really playing together and operating that 11 as one that they say in the locker room that we heard about for the last couple of years, but we didn't really see on the field. We actually are seeing that now, and I think that's the mark of a great coach, is being able to take the type of talent that Matias has been given and being able to make with it what he's been able to so far. Now, the mark of an amazing coach is going to be, can he have this team continue? And that's where we're going to have to wait for the next 2 to 3 months to find out.
Yeah, the hallmark of coaching is for your team to be more than the sum of its parts, and right now I think we can safely say that the Quakes are.
Yep.
It's about whether it'll be able to last.
So proficient for me. Yep.
Yeah, and proficient from me too. I think it was a bit nervy there in the beginning, quite anxious in the beginning. Folks were maybe even calling for his head, calling for the change of system. What was it going to be? But they've come good. The form has been decent and above average. They've done what they've needed to do. 4 points on the road out of 6 the last couple of weeks here. Avaya Castle is doing its thing and pounding out the wins. And on a football level, and just kind of separating my own love for the Quakes and being a fan and being a former employee, is the football is fun to watch, and it's dynamic, and it's modern, and it allows the players to express themselves in ways that they haven't been able to do so. It's opened their minds. You can see it has opened their minds to see a new style and loving the game, much like Matias does, because every interview he gives, you can feel him tell you how much he loves the game, and you can see these players really kind of understanding soccer and football, not just on a tactics level, or I'm going to run here, I'm going to run there, but really enjoying having the ball at their feet, having the bulk of the possession, creating the chances, being able to get into these different spaces, high pressing, obviously expending a lot of energy, and I'm sure they're pretty tired. But this manager has certainly stamped his mark on this side. There's going to be some summer signings to come, especially a number 10, but proficient from me as well.
And I think you should start to see some of that energy, translate from the field into the stands. A lot of Quakes fans have understandably been frustrated from the last 2 years, and as such, the attendance at Via Stadium has really struggled this season. But I think as you see the Quakes continue to improve, there should be more excitement around this team.
I completely agree, and I think today I saw an article about watchability ratings, and they're in the top 10 in the watchability ratings because they're fun to watch, and that's an amazing accomplishment as well, to take a team like this and to bring a completely new style to MLS. Not only is it interesting to watch them defensively, because that's the first thing that you notice, but now people are starting to talk about their attacking and the way that they controlled the ball against DC in DC and the way that they were able to create their opportunities, and in different ways than they had in previous games. With Vako winning the ball and then attacking through the middle, forcing their defense to try to collapse and then creating other options, it was actually something a little bit different than a lot of the winger play we had seen earlier in the season. And so not only are they fun to watch, but they give you something different to see pretty much every game right now.
Terrific question by our co-host, Joel Soria, who is watching even on his vacation time. For Joel Soria, for Jamon Moore, Alex Morgan, our producer, Aaron Sholl, and Jason Sholl. We appreciate you guys tuning in. My name is Charles Wollin. This is episode number 16 of Black and Azul. We will be right back next week with a fresh episode number 17 of Black and Azul. Remember, you can always leave your comments, your feedback, ask us some questions, and thank you so much for tuning in on this Wednesday evening. Cheers.